I want to start out by saying if you don't believe in ghosts and you don't want to believe in ghosts, then you should probably shut this video off now. I did not believe in ghosts a long time ago, but I believe the Lord has shown me differently, and I will be talking about that in this video. What I went through to learn about that, how I believe it applies to us today as the called out bride, and this dream that I had, which I'm going to explain first the dream, and then I'll go through the rest. Here's the dream. I was in a kitchen area, much set up like my grandmother's kitchen when I was little. I seemed to be with coworkers, but I was sitting by myself at a table near the door. I was looking through a pack of playing cards when suddenly I realized that I was dreaming. I became very excited right away because this rarely happens to me. I couldn't decide what to do, so I made up my mind to go outside. I got up and opened the door, and as I was closing it, I looked up in the sky. It was a beautiful blue day, blue clouds. It was a beautiful blue sky with white clouds, which I really love to see even driving to work. And I thought to myself, this looks exactly like real life. I then turned my face towards the sun, and I could feel the warmth on my face. Everything seemed very realistic. I knew that I could not fly, because when you're dreaming, a lot of us want to fly, but I did know that I could float. So I needed momentum to float. So I went outside of the building and I kicked off of it, and I easily went upwards. I got as high as the trees, and I thought about floating to outer space. A lot of people have visions and they'll say, I was taken into outer space and I saw the earth. And when I read those words, I am envious because I want to go into space. But in the dream, I decided if I go into outer space, I might not be able to get back. Don't ask me why I thought that, but I did. So I thought I would just go above the cloud or above the trees and float around. It seemed like it was in a park area, but there were no people on the ground. And as I looked around me, I then noticed another figure in the trees who seemed shrouded in sickly green rags. And this is what this thing looked like almost exactly, only there were no swords with it. It was just this raggy thing with the face of a skull. That was what it had. It was floating towards me, and this is another way that I knew it was a ghost, was because of this skull. I didn't feel any fear. I was just curious. So I placed my hand inside the skull and I wiggled it around. It wasn't a bone, it was not dense as if it was from another dimension. And I wiggled my hand and it turned into a man's face, and the shroud went away. And I got the immediate impression in my dream that this man was from a long time ago, long before me. He had soft, long brown hair with a bit of a wave and a mustache, much like this picture here. He wore a hat that seemed to have maybe a feather in it. That's all I recall of his features. I only remember like from shoulders up. But he was very upset and looking around, and he was distraught, and this is what he said. He said, I feel awful that I killed her with my rapier. Okay, now I knew, in the dream even, I knew that a rapier was a sword, but that's all I recalled. I felt compassion for him and knew that since he was dead, if he would just look towards the light of God, that he could become a changed person. I knew he was in a different dimension than me, so what I said to him was, have you found Jesus? And he kind of laughed and said, no. And I told him to look for the light, even a pinpoint of light, because that would be the light of Jesus and he could heal him. Then I woke up. Now I do want to mention to you that I know that there's a false light out there. That's how Satan appears. I have studied so many near-death experiences. I understand this false light, but when I was talking to this ghost, and I'm referring to him as a ghost even throughout this dream and this explanation, because I don't know the specific terms. There's spirit, soul, and body, and this seemed to be the ghost, the soul of the man. So I wanted to tell you that I understand the false light, but I was going to explain to him the light of God, because when that light comes over a person in a near-death experience, unlike the false light, God's light, they are totally enveloped in love. They can't even explain it. Decades later, they can tell you about their near-death experience, and they start crying because they remember that love. Okay, that is not that is not from Satan. That particular one is from God. That's what I was going to explain to this gentleman. So, with one exception in my life, and I may do a video on this someday, I'm praying about that, I do not recall ever having a supernatural encounter that stands out. When I was younger, I did not believe in ghosts or aliens. I never touched a Ouija board. I did not attend any seances. I don't see dead people or smell demonic smells or angelic fragrances. I never watched The Exorcist. I was a typical Sunday school going Wesleyan child, but I went through some sinful teenage years like many of us do, but then I got married and settled down. After a few years of that, my husband and I started attending church regularly with our daughter. But learning about the supernatural was never part of church, as it's not taught in most churches. After my second bout with cancer, I realized that God was doing something in my life and it would be changing soon. I gave my life totally to Him and started learning. He began by having me focus on these shows like Ghost Hunters for a few years. What I learned from that, and believe me, I knew this was weird. This was not the typical Christian life. You don't watch ghost shows just for the fun of it. So I knew even then God was showing me something. So what I learned from it, for the most part, is that not everything is what you think it is. At first, I did not believe in ghosts. I thought, well, if there even are ghosts, they're all demons. But I learned differently by researching and even talking to coworkers. And I say that because I learned some of them had some very old homes. And as a believer by then in ghosts, I asked them if they'd ever had any strange occurrences. And if you believe people, they will open up to you. It's exactly the same way as us in the prophetic world want to tell people what's going to happen. If people are open to it, we explain it to them. If they're not, we keep quiet. And that's the same thing about people that have ghosts. So I knew I needed to know if ghosts even existed. And so I learned all this from my research. And also the Lord knew I needed to know it was in the Bible. And so in Luke 24, starting at 37 to 39, and this is about the disciples, they were startled and frightened, thinking they saw a ghost. Jesus said to them, "Why are you troubled, and why do doubts rise in your minds? Look at my hands and my feet. It is I myself. Touch me and see. A ghost does not have flesh and bones, as you see that I have." Now, as I read that, it occurred to me that one, some of the disciples believed in ghosts, and two, that Jesus never said there were no such thing as ghosts, that I would expect him to say that. What he said was, they don't have flesh and bones. So for me, that points to ghosts existing for me. After learning about this, then the Lord drew me into studying about near-death experiences, or NDEs. Now, the ghost shows pointed me towards the people with NDEs. A lot of times they thought they were seeing ghosts when they were dead. They didn't even know they were dead. After much study and research in the NDE area, again, I learned that not everything is as we have been taught, and a prominent NDE stood out to me as I was pondering this dream, and that is the man that had 3 NDEs. He was a former Marine. On one of his NDEs, he died and saw what he describes as a blue-gray place, and that there are many souls there. They're mostly soldiers, prisoners, suicides, people that can't forgive others. To me, this is the place where the ghost from my dream was. He was in this gray dimensional area. So I asked God, I've been praying about this, and I said, God, why have I had this dream? And he said, I'm sorry, I lost my place. My purpose, my ministry is to not learn about all this evil, and that is some people's ministries, granted. Mine is about encouraging and finding the remnant part of the bride and explaining what I believe our purpose is based kind of on Isaiah 60 and other things we've learned. How does having a ghost in a dream help with that? Okay, well, God works in mysterious ways, and I needed to share with you about this dream because of this. Is it possible, this is the crux of the matter, is it possible that we may help people in this blue-gray place find Jesus? I'll give you some things to think about as well as scripture that may point to this. I don't know. It just seems possible. As a remnant bride, we know that soon Jesus will fill us with the former and latter rains, his living water, and we will appear to him we will appear as him for those who are seeking him. They will see us as we are transformed, but they will also see Jesus through miracles and things like that. He's told us numerous times in words and messages that we will be one with him. Now, that is not to be confused with us being Jesus. We will still be ourselves, but we'll be one with the Lord. And that's how others will see us, as Jesus. Might these miracles that we help perform go beyond the living person? Well, they did when Jesus died. If you look at 1 Peter 3:18 and 19, it says, "For Christ also suffered for sins once for all, the righteous for the unrighteous, to bring you to God. He was put to death in the body, but made alive in the spirit, in which he also went and preached to the spirits in prison, who disobeyed long ago, when God waited patiently in the days of Noah, while the ark was being built." Okay, so clearly Jesus preached to spirits that had sinned. Many would argue that these were the Nephilim, but we know that demons exist now because they are the souls of the Nephilim, and I base this on George Pember's book, Earth's Earliest Ages. So for me, that means that these souls or spirits in this dimension were something else. Perhaps they were ghosts of men, souls of men. Jesus was preaching to these ghosts while he was in the grave. But something else happened at the same time in Matthew 27, verses 52 and 53. It says, starting with 51, it says, "At that moment, the veil of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. The earth quaked and the rocks were split. The tombs broke open and the bodies of many saints who had fallen asleep were raised. After Jesus' resurrection, when they had come out of the tombs, they entered the holy city and appeared to many people." Now you can read much more about this event in the Gospel of Nicodemus, which is also known as the Acts of Pilate. It's an apocryphal, whatever that word is, book. I would also tell you, apocryphal, okay, I can't do it. I would also tell you that this book discusses the salvation of some of the Pharisees that had crucified Jesus. So in my opinion, maybe that's why it's not in our Bible. Certain people didn't want it to be there. They didn't want to know what happened to those people that believed in Jesus. I don't know. But as we see the pattern from the Bible, we see a great darkness when Jesus died, an earthquake, speaking to ghosts, not demons, and the raising of the dead. 3 of these same events will happen soon: the darkness, the earthquake, and the dead in Christ rising. Is it possible that we, as the called out ones, may appear to these spirits in prison, like in my dream, those who feel sorry for what they did and could very well repent if given the chance? I don't know. I know it's controversial. I know there are verses in the Bible about you have one chance to come to Christ. I do know what happened in the Bible, though, although I'm quick to say that the account of Jesus and those spirits is controversial. There are many debates about what really took place. But in my dream, I knew I was talking with a ghost, and my own body was supernatural since I could float. And I was telling the ghost about the gospel of Christ. Believe me, I know how weird this is. I don't argue that. So I would suggest strongly you go to the Lord and ask him. I don't know why I had this dream, but this seems very encouraging to me. I will add one thing real quickly so I can wrap this up. A very, very dear friend of mine had a vision of me once where I was pulling someone out of the gates of hell. I was actually standing in the gates of hell in my transformed body, and I was pulling someone out. So that kind of is a confirmation for me that not everybody that is in this harvest to be saved is going to be a living person that's walking the earth right now. I don't know. I bring it to you and leave it in your hands, and leave it especially in the Lord's hands. He's the only one who truly knows.